Welcome to Conversations with HJM. I'm Lisa Harris-Jones.
And I'm Tommy Thompson.
And today we have Secretary John King. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for the opportunity.
So you're running for governor. Can you tell us a little bit about why you want to be governor and share with our viewers why you?
Sure. Well, really, I decided to run for governor for the same reasons I decided to become a teacher in the first place at the start of my career. When I was growing up as a kid, both my parents passed away when I was little. My mom when I was 8 and my dad when I was 12. And in the period in between was just my dad and me. My dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. So home was this place that was incredibly inconsistent and unstable and scary a lot of the time. The thing that saved me was school. School was a place that was safe and nurturing and supportive, and I had these amazing relationships with teachers and peers, and that saved my life. If not for that, I'd be dead or in prison today. And so I became a teacher to try to do for other kids what teachers had done for me. And over my career as an educator, from teacher to principal to Secretary of Education for President Obama, I could always see how kids and families were so profoundly affected by all the other systems in their lives, whether or not they had safe and affordable housing, whether or not they had health care, whether or not their parents could find a good job. And I really concluded that governors are just uniquely positioned to work across the different policy silos to make government a force for good in people's lives. And that's what I wanted to do. So I decided to run, and it's been a great experience so far. You know, I bring to the race both very clear progressive policy positions and experience in government getting big things done. And I think that's what we need in our next governor.
And I want to say on the person of John King, you wrote a great op-ed. It was entitled "From Enslaved to the White House, My History Cannot Be Erased." And if our viewers haven't read that article, what does it say about you and how does it frame what you're trying to do here in Maryland?
Yeah. Well, really, in that piece, I tried to share the history of my family and to use that history to argue that we need to make sure all of our kids get a full understanding and appreciation of the complexities of our history as a country. So I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, in Montgomery County. My great-grandfather was enslaved in Gaithersburg, Maryland, about 25 miles from where I live. And over the last few years, we've done extensive research into our family history and actually found the exact property where my great-grandfather was enslaved is still owned by the family, descendants of the family that owned my family, that enslaved my family. And we've gotten to know them. We've actually gotten to become friends with them. We've spent time on the property. It's maintained just like it was in the 1860s. The main house is still the main house that was built in the 1700s. And the cabin that my great-grandfather lived in as an enslaved person with his family is still standing on the property. So I've had the chance with my wife and my daughters to stand inside of that cabin. And when you're inside of that cabin, two things really come to you very clearly. One, how intimate the institution of slavery was. That cabin is not 30 yards from the main house. These were two families living in the same space, but one owned the other. The other thing that comes through when you're standing in that cabin is how profoundly hopeful it is that in my family, we went in 3 generations from enslaved in that cabin to serving in the cabinet of the first Black president. And so to me, that's a story about opportunity. Right, and the question is, can we as a state make sure that every Marylander, regardless of race, regardless of zip code, regardless of income, regardless of immigration status, every Marylander has access to opportunity? And if we do that, great things are possible in the state and in the country.
How would you bring the business community and the average person together as the governor of Maryland to make sure, you know, everyone is growing and doing well?
Yeah. Well, look, COVID has really highlighted and exacerbated disparities that existed before COVID. You know, so one of my worries is that when we talk about COVID recovery, that we talk about how do we get back to February 2020, and I would argue that's not good enough. We actually have to build something that's much more just, much more equitable, and to me that is about a combination of economic development and economic dignity. Economic development means we need to grow jobs, and we need to think about how we green the economy as a way to grow jobs and renewable energy. We have to think about how we invest in our small businesses. I think we ought to create a state bank that would help to facilitate lending through community banks to small businesses, particularly owned by women and people of color, where we can grow jobs. We ought to be thinking about how we leverage our assets like Johns Hopkins and NIH to drive economic development in the state, to give opportunities to academics at those institutions to create new inventions, new products, and build businesses here in Maryland. But we can't just focus on wealth creation. We also have to think about economic dignity. Are we improving people's quality of life? And to me, that means things like paid family leave. That means making sure that there's access to good public transit, to affordable housing, to affordable childcare. We know there are a lot of women who've had to leave the workforce because they couldn't get childcare during this period. So we have to be thoughtful about both of those. I think the next governor has a huge opportunity, especially with the federal resources through the Biden administration, to do a lot of good work to accelerate economic growth in the state and really improve quality of life for everyone.
So Secretary King, during the pandemic, you founded a nonprofit organization, Strong Future Maryland. And despite being a fledgling organization and during a pandemic, your association was very active in Annapolis on an array of policy issues. Can you kind of fill us in on what the association was trying to do and what you hope to build on in the upcoming session?
Yeah, so the core vision for Strong Future Maryland was that we have to have an equitable recovery from COVID, and that we should seize this moment as really a New Deal moment. Maybe this is a high school social studies teacher way of thinking about it, but FDR during the New Deal not only tried to get us out of the Depression, but tried to build a stronger economy for the country going forward. I think this can be that kind of moment where we say, let's recover from COVID, but let's also build something better. We focus on a variety of areas: education, worker protections, protecting people from eviction, trying to tackle climate change, which scientists are telling us is this looming threat that we got to be prepared for, but also an opportunity to create good green jobs. We did a lot of work around economic development, working with Speaker Jones on a Black economic agenda focused on how we address the racial wealth gap. We testified on more than 60 bills. So we were very active. I think 23 of those bills that we worked on actually passed into law. So we felt really good coming out of session. I think a lot of good things were accomplished during the session. And we also know there's a lot more work to do.
Well, thank you for joining us. But before you leave, do you have any last thoughts, anything you want to share with our viewers?
Sure, I'd just say, look, I'm a classroom teacher who became a policy leader, who had the opportunity to serve in President Obama's cabinet, who's a Montgomery County public school parent, and I'm committed that we can do more as a state to build a more just future. I know we can raise our aspirations, and whether it's tackling public safety issues in Baltimore City or addressing the fact that we're losing farmland right here on the Eastern Shore to saltwater intrusion because of climate change, we can do more to build a more just, more equitable, more prosperous future in the state. That's what this campaign is about, and I hope folks will join the movement and check us out at johnkingforgovernor.com.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us with Conversations with HJM.